Hi everyone, it's Candace, you know me last time. So the speech I'm going to be fighting against today, or arguing against, is Mr. Ortiz, Gabriel, we just heard. His topic was mass media, and his claim that he represented was mass media affects the moral standards of consumers. So I'm like, okay, mass media, you know, it's my next class, let's see what he has. His claims was mass media has shown negative effects and behaviors of children, but his next claim following is mass media on youth behavior has shown positive effects. So are we doing negative or are we doing positive? You know, let me look at his details. So before I go through his details, I look at his sources, and his sources are two of them from a website called PubMed. It looks like it's an article. There's no details that's backing up his evidence. There's really hard to work with. So I checked his last source, and his last source was from Tobacco Media Exposure, Cigarette Experimentation. That source we're going to get into his first claim. So his claims was study found a connection between children's television, internet use, and anxiety. Me hearing that, I'm thinking that without a phone or internet or TV, you're going to build anxiety if I'm not using it. And it's true, he is right by that. But after a day, you get over it. And that's not really stating what is the standards of media. Another thing is news of dangers, hazards in society, the surroundings. Imagery provokes fear and raise aggression level in children consuming media featuring violence. I'm thinking video games causes violence, not social media. Not me checking my Instagram is going to make me act out in violence. I'm going to get this, no. Another thing, youth may be influenced into habits such as smoking by media portraits. That's one of his sources, how if I see someone smoking on a picture, am I going to go have a cigarette? Do you see, if someone jumps off a cliff, are you going to jump off a cliff? It's the same symbol. So his points weren't really strong by that. I looked at his sources. Once again, it was just about 4 sentences in each article. So there was no backing up. His secondary claim was how mass media influences youth's behavior on positive effects. They influence them by informing them on the issues. Media has determined youth from negative habits such as cigarette smoking has shown success and helps children develop emotional, social skills. So his first claim shows if you see someone smoking a cigarette on the media, you're gonna want to smoke it. But his secondary claim shows that there's commercials that stops it. So you have to choose a side, really. So I could choose a side against you, and now it's going back and forth. And helps children develop emotional skills and social skills. You really don't develop social skills because if I'm talking to you online and we meet in person, that conversation could be dead. It could be really dead. We don't know what to say because why? We're just typing away. You're just getting comfortable with that one person, not really social. Emotional, yeah, you may feel a disconnect with someone because you're building feelings for someone you don't even know. Once again, like you could be like catfish, in other words. So my things, how I want to say against him was, where was I? You could cancel anything out on the screen you see. You don't have to think it's more negative. I believe mass media has more beneficial factors than negative factors now today, and his sources was back in 2008. Nowadays, media, you go online, you can see news that you don't really see often. Like say if you're busy all day, you just, while all on my phones right now, right? I see a couple people on their phones, and what are you gonna do? You're looking what's new on the news right now. You know what I mean? Just kidding.
Point to him.
But that's just what I'm saying. We're using media for a reason. We're not really negativing it. It's more positive than negative, and that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
All right, well, you labeled the advocate's claim and the secondary points, and you, I think, present an interesting idea that there's a dilemma here, that they're trying to have it both ways. They're suggesting that mass media, or I should say social media, mass media, have a negative effect on society, and then in the second point, it also has a positive effect on society. That seems like inherently contradictory, and so there's an inconsistency to begin with in the advocate's argument. I think that's a reasonable point to make. That there might not be overlap on those points is the way that I'm sure that if we had a response from the advocate would probably be the way they'd proceed. Although the best illustration that you have of the inconsistency of the advocate's argument is the smoking issue, suggesting that smoking is encouraged by its depiction in the mass media on the first point, and then on the second point suggesting that the mass media can discourage people from developing bad smoking habits. I'm going, okay, well, wait a second. These points are directly contradictory. That makes no sense whatsoever, and I think that's the reasonable position to take on this and say, look, in the long run, we could look at smoking trends, for instance. I think that you miss an opportunity to talk about this as the mass media has gotten broader and broader, as social media has developed, as more and more people are interconnected through these mass forms of communication. What's been the trend on smoking? I think it would be pretty easy to point that it's been downward. All right. Now, you don't necessarily have to say that that's a cause-effect relationship, but it certainly diminishes the argument on the first point, and it seems to suggest that media is probably a part of that process. And so that would support the position that you're taking, or suggest that media has very little to do with those kinds of things, that there are other factors that are involved there. And I think that that might have been a good counterclaim to present on the argument. There's a lot of analysis of what the advocate's evidence said or didn't say or how thin it was, and I thought there were a couple of reasonable points there. The one thing that you might want to do is refer back to the actual quote that the advocate presented and show us how it said nothing. If it's a vague sentence that makes a conclusion, and he's concluding from this statement that this is true, but that's the statement they made. It doesn't refer to X. It doesn't provide any statistics. There's no example in this particular information. So I think that your argument about the lack of quality of the evidence that the advocate presents needs to be a little bit more forceful. You've got the right idea here, but you need to say it in a little bit more direct way to make it sound much more like there's substance there. It's okay. Wait a second. What was that nickname that you have, or the other name? Yeah. Don't tell me you don't want to sound mean. I know that doesn't work. Your nom de plume, your other persona. All right. I understand in class. Everybody, and they're right in front of you. You don't want to punch them in the eye. But you do want to be forceful about those kinds of things. I think you'd take the argument at the end. It says, in the long run, expanded access to media and social media has had a beneficial effect to people. We've got lots of ways to illustrate that. A couple of pieces of information to support your point would be helpful, but that seems like it's the right reaction to the advocate's claim. All right, thank you.